Story 1. The Abandoned House. The digital clock on Jake's nightstand read 1:34 a.m. Horror movie credits rolled on the TV screen, casting eerie blue shadows across his bedroom, where we sprawled amid empty soda cans and chip bags. 4 films deep, and despite the burning in my eyes, sleep remained elusive. The parade of vengeful spirits and lurking shadows from our movie marathon had left my nerves frayed, though I'd never admitted to Jake. "That last one was lame," Jake declared, tossing a pillow against the wall. "No real scares." I nodded, though secretly the movie had unsettled me. Jake had always been braver than me, or better at pretending. We'd been best friends since 3rd grade, but something about tonight felt different, charged with a strange anticipation I couldn't explain. Jake suddenly sat up, his eyes gleaming with that familiar look that always preceded trouble. "I've got an idea," he whispered, though his parents were asleep on the other side of the house. "You know that old block they're tearing down next week?" My stomach tightened. Everyone knew about the condemned houses 4 blocks away, a row of decaying homes barricaded behind chain-link fences and warning signs awaiting demolition. "What about it?" I asked, already dreading his answer. "Let's check it out," Jake said, reaching for his digital camera. "Take some pictures. Could be our only chance before they're gone." Every rational part of my 15-year-old brain screamed that trespassing in condemned buildings after midnight was a terrible idea. But the fear of disappointing Jake, of being labeled a coward, somehow outweighed the risks. "Fine," I muttered, "but we're not going inside, just looking from outside." Jake's grin widened. "Deal." We slipped out through his bedroom window, carefully navigating the roof before descending the garden trellis. The night was unnaturally still, wrapped in suffocating silence. No barking dogs, no passing cars, just our footsteps and my pounding heart. The condemned block loomed ahead, surrounded by dormant floodlights that created a pocket of perfect darkness. The chain-link fence gleamed dully in the moonlight, faded, no trespassing signs fluttering in a sudden chill breeze. "Over here," Jake whispered, leading me to a section of fence where someone had cut a neat hole. The jagged edges looked fresh. "Someone's already been here," I pointed out, hoping this might dissuade him. Jake shrugged. "Probably just some other kids." He slipped through the gap with practiced ease. I hesitated, scanning the silent street before following him, the sharp edges catching my shirt as I squeezed past. The air inside the fence felt heavier, saturated with the stench of rot and abandonment. Dead leaves crunched beneath our sneakers as we approached the houses, gray, lifeless shells in the dim light. Jake's flashlight beam revealed peeling paint and broken steps. "This one," he decided, pointing to a 2-story Victorian with a sagging porch. Unlike its neighbors, this house seemed to absorb the light, the darkness around it somehow denser, more deliberate. We circled the structure slowly, testing windows and doors, but everything had been secured with plywood and heavy-duty nails. Jake's determination grew with each thwarted attempt. "Let's try the back," he suggested. The backyard was overgrown, weeds reclaiming what had once been a garden. The concrete patio was cracked, thick ivy pushing through the fissures. Our flashlight beams danced across boarded windows and a sealed door. "Look," Jake said suddenly, pointing upward. "2nd floor." I followed his gaze to a window where one plywood sheet had come loose at the bottom, creating a small triangular gap. Not large enough to climb through, but offering a view inside. "I need to get up there," Jake said. "Give me a boost." I wanted to refuse, to insist we leave, but the excitement in Jake's eyes was contagious. I braced myself against the wall, interlocking my fingers to create a step. As I did, a persistent feeling settled over me. We were being watched, not from the street, but from inside the house itself. Jake placed his foot in my hands, gripping my shoulders for balance as I lifted him. He steadied himself against the peeling siding, raising the camera to the opening. "Can you see anything?" I whispered, straining under his weight. "It's too dark," he replied, adjusting the camera. "I'm going to use the flash." The burst of light temporarily blinded me, leaving purple spots dancing across my vision. Jake took several more photos in rapid succession, each flash illuminating the yard in stark, ghostly detail. "That's enough," I hissed, my arms trembling. "Someone might see the flashes." Jake took one final photo before allowing me to lower him. His expression was unreadable in the darkness, but there was a new tension in his shoulders, a hesitancy that hadn't been there before. "Did you see something?" I asked, rubbing my sore palms against my jeans. "Not really," he answered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Just an empty room. Let's check the other houses." We explored the remaining buildings but found no other viewpoints. By the time we slipped back through the fence, my watch showed 3:17 a.m. and Jake's earlier enthusiasm had noticeably dimmed. The walk back felt longer, the silence between us heavier. Jake kept checking his camera, scrolling through the photos, but angling the screen away whenever I tried to look. "What's wrong?" I finally asked as we approached his house. "You're acting weird." "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Just tired. I'll show you the pictures when we get back." We climbed through his bedroom window, our clothes reeking of dust and mildew. As Jake connected his camera to his laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling that our midnight adventure had somehow changed him, or changed something between us. "Let's see what we got," Jake said, his voice carefully neutral as the images began loading on the screen. Neither of us was prepared for what appeared before our eyes. The laptop screen illuminated our tired faces as Jake scrolled through the photos. Most were unremarkable, dark, blurry shots of boarded windows and crumbling facades. "These aren't very good," I remarked, trying to break the tension. Jake didn't respond. His finger hovered over the trackpad before clicking to the next image, the first photo from the window with the loose board. The room appeared empty except for a rusty bed frame against the far wall, wallpaper peeling in long strips. "Wait," Jake's voice faltered as he clicked to the next photo. My breath caught. The same room, same angle, but no longer empty. In the corner opposite the bed frame stood a woman in a brown raincoat. The camera flash had caught her in stark relief, her skin unnaturally white, almost luminescent. Long black hair hung in limp, wet-looking strands, partially obscuring her face, but not enough to hide her expression of profound sorrow. "That's not possible," I whispered, my mouth dry. "There wasn't anyone in there. The place was sealed." Jake zoomed in. The woman's visible eye seemed to stare directly at the camera, yet somehow through it. Her mouth hung slightly open, frozen in what could have been a silent scream. "Maybe it's just shadows," Jake suggested without conviction. We both knew better. The figure was too solid, too present. As Jake zoomed further, more details emerged, the raincoat stained with dark patches, fingernails visibly cracked where one pale hand clutched the coat closed. The wall behind her showed water damage that wasn't visible in the previous photo, dark streaks running down as if her presence had somehow brought moisture with her. "Go to the next one," I urged, morbid curiosity overriding my fear. The next photo showed the same scene, but the woman had moved closer to the camera, her posture rigid, one hand reaching slightly outward. The movement wasn't much, but it confirmed our worst suspicions. This wasn't a shadow or illusion. Whatever the camera had captured was mobile. In the final photo, the woman was much closer, her face filling most of the frame. Her hair had parted enough to reveal hollow cheeks, cracked lips, and eyes that reflected the flash with an unnatural blue luminescence. Her mouth was open wider, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous, too sharp. "Delete them," I said, backing away. Delete all of them right now. Jake stared at the screen, transfixed. We need to go back. We need to make sure no one's trapped in there. Are you insane? That's not a person, Jake. Whatever that is, it's not natural. It's just some homeless woman who broke in, Jake argued unconvincingly. She could be hurt. The demolition crew will check everything before they tear it down. Jake closed the laptop, plunging the room into darkness. Fine, we'll go back tomorrow in daylight, but I'm going with or without you. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale face staring back, those unnaturally reflective eyes. I felt that by taking those photos, by witnessing whatever entity resided in that house, we had somehow drawn its attention. Morning came with reluctant gray light. By noon, we were back at the condemned houses, the daylight doing little to diminish their oppressive atmosphere. This is a mistake, I muttered as we squeezed through the fence. Jake led the way back to the third house, moving with purposeful strides. When we reached the back, he immediately positioned himself under the loose board. Boost me up again, he commanded. Jake, seriously, let's just go. I need to see if she's still there. Reluctantly, I lifted him toward the opening. Jake peered through the gap for a long moment, then took several more photos on his phone. Well, I asked as I lowered him down. Nothing, he said, his expression mixed with relief and disappointment. Completely empty. I should have felt reassured, but something in his tone unsettled me. Let me see the pictures. Jake hesitated before handing me his phone. I scrolled through the new photos, the same empty room with peeling wallpaper. No sign of the woman. But there was something different, a dark stain on the floor beneath where she had been standing, roughly the size and shape of a person lying down. We should report this, I suggested. Jake shook his head. And tell them what? That we trespassed and maybe saw a ghost? They'd just get us in trouble. Back at his house, we researched the property's history in the local newspaper's online archives. 5 years earlier, a woman named Marion Reeves had lived in that house with her husband and daughter. After losing both in a car accident, she fell into depression. 3 months later, she committed suicide by hanging herself in the upstairs bedroom, the same room we photographed. The article mentioned she was found wearing a brown raincoat despite the summer heat. Jesus, Jake whispered. What are the odds? Do you think she's haunting the place? Maybe she can't move on because the house is still there. We decided to attend the demolition scheduled for the day after tomorrow. If the house is keeping her trapped, Jake reasoned, maybe seeing it destroyed will help set her free. The morning of the demolition arrived with unseasonable fog. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered to watch the condemned houses come down. Jake and I stood among them, our eyes fixed on the third house. When the wrecking ball struck Marion Reeves's former home, I swear I heard something beneath the crash. A long sighing sound, like a final exhale after holding breath for too long. Jake heard it too. I could tell by how his eyes widened, his hand gripping my shoulder. The house collapsed, decades of memories and pain reduced to rubble. As the dust settled, an inexplicable sense of lightness came over me, as if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted. That night, Jake connected his camera to check the original photos one last time. They're gone, he announced, staring at the error message. The files are corrupted. I should have felt relieved, but a nagging unease remained. The demolition crew built new houses on the cleared lot the following year. Life continued. But sometimes, passing by the development, I catch glimpses in my peripheral vision. A figure standing between houses or watching from a window. Gone when I turn to look. Some boundaries, once crossed, can never be fully restored. Some images, once seen, leave permanent impressions not just on camera sensors, but on the mind and soul. Story 2. The Smiling Man. I've always been a night person. The The quiet streets, the empty sidewalks, the way the city transforms after midnight. There's a certain peace in walking alone through urban darkness. For 4 years, I lived downtown in a major U.S. city, and my nocturnal walks became a ritual, a way to process my thoughts when my roommate, decidedly not a night owl, had long since fallen asleep. These walks never frightened me. Even in a city with its share of crime, I'd never felt unsafe. I often joked with friends that even the drug dealers in my neighborhood were polite. "Excuse me, sir, would you perhaps be interested in purchasing some illegal substances this evening?" I'd mimic, and we'd laugh. The city at night was my sanctuary, my private domain. Until that Wednesday night. It was somewhere between 1 o'clock and 2 a.m. when I decided to extend my usual route past a small city park. The park was regularly patrolled and generally considered safe, even at night. The streets were unusually quiet, even for a weeknight. No traffic, no distant sirens, no fellow insomniacs walking dogs or stumbling home from bars. Just empty sidewalks stretching under yellowed streetlights. I turned down a narrow side street that would loop me back toward my apartment. The road was lined with parked cars on one side, closed storefronts on the other. About halfway down the block, I noticed something unusual at the far end. A figure. A man. He was little more than a silhouette at first, backlit by the intersection's traffic light. What caught my attention wasn't his presence. Occasional late-night pedestrians weren't unusual, but his movement. He was dancing, not the stumbling shuffle of a drunk or the mindless sway of someone listening to music through headphones. This was deliberate, patterned movement. As I continued walking toward him, as he was on my path home, the movement became clearer. He performed what resembled a waltz, but with an added flourish. Each box step ending with a forward stride, head bobbing slightly. Step, 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 lunge. Step, 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 lunge. I remember thinking it looked like a dance-walk hybrid, as if he were trying to make ordinary walking more theatrical. Just a drunk guy, I thought, though his movements were far too coordinated. Still, I moved closer to the street, giving him plenty of room to pass on the sidewalk. I didn't make eye contact, adopting the universal city dweller's approach to unusual behavior, polite disregard. But as the distance between us closed, details emerged that made my skin prickle. His clothes came into focus first, an old-fashioned suit, not ragged or dirty like a homeless person's, but dated and ill-fitting, hanging from his tall, lanky frame as if tailored for someone with more substance. The fabric caught the streetlight in an unusual way, not quite reflecting it properly. Then I saw his face. His head was tilted back slightly, face angled toward the night sky rather than the path ahead. His eyes were open unnaturally wide, too wide for someone navigating a dark street, the whites visible all around the irises. But it was his mouth that made my stomach drop. Stretched into a smile of such exaggerated width that it distorted his entire face. Not the broad grin of someone genuinely happy, but a grotesque pantomime of a smile, stretching literally from ear to ear. This wasn't the expression of someone drunk or high. This was something else entirely. Something wrong. Instinctively, I stepped into the street to cross to the other side, wanting to put as much distance between us as possible. As I reached the opposite sidewalk, I glanced back and froze. The man had stopped dancing. He stood perfectly still at the exact point where I had crossed, one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to where I now stood. His body was fully facing me, but his face remained tilted skyward, that impossible smile still stretching his features. The hairs on my arms stood on end. My heart pounded in my chest as a primal part of my brain screamed danger. Yet, I remained rooted to the spot, unable to turn away. For what felt like minutes but was likely only seconds, neither of us moved. Then, needing to break the paralysis, I forced myself to look away, focusing on the empty sidewalk ahead. 20 steps to the corner, then a right turn, and I'd be on a busier street. I took a deep breath and began walking, my pace deliberately measured despite the urge to run. I managed about half a block before the need to check behind me became overwhelming. I turned, expecting, hoping to see an empty street. He was gone. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by a new wave of dread as I scanned the scene more carefully. The spot where he had been standing was vacant, the street empty in both directions. There were no doorways or alleys nearby where he could have disappeared so quickly. It was as if he had simply vanished. I allowed myself a moment's comfort. Perhaps he had continued on his way in the opposite direction, moving faster than I'd anticipated. Just as this rationalization began to take hold, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. Across the street, slightly crouched down in shadow, was a figure. Even in the dim light, I recognized the distinctive silhouette. Somehow, in the brief moment I'd looked away, he had crossed the street and moved half a block in perfect silence. And he was facing me. At least, his body was. His face remained angled skyward, that grotesque smile still visible even from this distance. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds. No one could move that quickly or quietly on foot. Not normally. Before I could process this impossibility, before I could decide whether to run or call out, he started moving again. But this time he wasn't dance-walking. He was coming toward me in exaggerated, tiptoed steps, knees high, feet placing down with deliberate precision, the way a cartoon character might sneak up on someone. Except there was nothing cartoonish about the speed of his movement. Those ridiculous, theatrical steps covered ground with terrifying efficiency, bringing him rapidly closer. And still that face remained tilted up, that smile fixed and unchanging, as if the two halves of him, body and face, were operating independently. Then, about a car's length away from me, he stopped. His body became perfectly still again, the exaggerated tiptoe pose frozen mid-step like a paused video. Only now he was close enough that I could see every detail of his face in the harsh streetlight. The unnaturally stretched skin around his mouth, the bloodless lips pulled back to reveal too many teeth, the wide eyes still fixed on some point in the night sky above. My mind raced through options. Run, scream, confront him. Each choice seemed equally likely to provoke whatever this was. I remained frozen, heart hammering so loudly I was certain he could hear it. When I finally found my voice, what I meant to say was, "What the fuck do you want?" in a commanding tone that would establish I wasn't an easy target. What came out instead was barely a whisper, my voice cracking with unmistakable fear. "What the fuck?" He didn't react, not a blink, not a twitch of that grotesque smile. His chest didn't even seem to move with breath. He simply stood there, still as a statue, still gazing skyward. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. The silence on the street was absolute. No distant traffic, no air conditioners humming, not even the rustle of leaves. Just my own ragged breathing and the pounding of blood in my ears. Then, with movements as deliberate as everything else he'd done, the smiling man slowly rotated his body 180 degrees, his feet pivoting with mechanical precision, while his head maintained its upward angle. That ghastly smile was now directed away from me, at whatever lay at the other end of the street. He stood motionless for another moment before resuming his dance-walking away from me, continuing the same waltz with a lunge pattern I'd first observed. Step, 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 lunge. Step, 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 lunge. Moving away with the same rhythmic motion, his back now to me, head still tilted to the sky. I remained paralyzed, watching his retreat, afraid that any movement might draw his attention back to me. When he was about half a block away, self-preservation finally overcame my shock. I turned and walked rapidly toward the intersection ahead, fighting the urge to run, keeping my footsteps as quiet as possible. I reached the corner and allowed myself a quick glance back. The smiling man was still dance-walking away, his movements growing smaller with distance. I turned right onto a better-lit street with occasional traffic and picked up my pace, finally allowing myself to breathe. My apartment was still 15 minutes away, but the familiar surroundings brought some comfort. I was nearly 2 blocks from the encounter when a horrible realization hit me. I hadn't heard the smiling man's footsteps. Not during his dance-walking, not during his cartoonish tiptoeing, not even during his mechanical rotation. Every movement had been executed in complete silence. I risked another look behind me. The cross street where I'd left him was empty. No sign of the bizarre figure. Relief washed over me. That relief was short-lived. As I turned back to continue my walk home, I noticed something in the distance ahead, a silhouette under a streetlight about a block away. A tall, thin silhouette. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't possible. There was no way he could have circled ahead of me so quickly. I blinked hard, hoping it was my imagination, a trick of shadows. But when I looked again, not only was he still there, he was closer. And he wasn't dance-walking now. He was running. Not the awkward, tiptoeing movement from before. This was a full sprint, arms pumping at his sides, legs covering ground with impossible speed. Yet his head remained tilted back, face to the sky, that horrific smile still stretching his features. I ran, too. Abandoning all pretense of composure, I bolted down the sidewalk, searching frantically for an open business, a passing car, another pedestrian, anything that might offer safety. The sound of my own panicked breathing and pounding footsteps filled my ears as I ran harder than I ever had in my life. I didn't look back again until I'd reached a major avenue where a few cars still passed occasionally. I spun around, scanning the street behind me. Nothing. No sign of the smiling man. I stood there gasping for breath, adrenaline still coursing through my system. Had I imagined the figure ahead of me? Had fear twisted ordinary shadows into the shape I dreaded most? A car approached, its headlights sweeping the street. For a brief moment, I considered flagging it down, asking for a ride, but what would I say? That I was being chased by a man who smiled at the sky and moved without sound. Instead, I continued toward home at a brisk walk, staying in the middle of the sidewalk, as far from shadows and doorways as possible. Every few steps, I glanced behind me, then ahead, then to the sides. My ears strained for the slightest sound that might signal his approach, but the smiling man never reappeared. I made it back to my apartment building, fumbled with my keys at the entrance, and practically fell inside when the door finally opened. I took the stairs 2 at a time rather than wait for the elevator, unwilling to be trapped in a small space, even briefly. Once inside my apartment, I locked the door, then wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. My roommate slept undisturbed as I checked every closet, behind the shower curtain, under the beds, anywhere a person might hide. Finding nothing, I collapsed onto the couch, lights on, too wired to sleep, too exhausted to move. I lived in that city for 6 more months after the encounter, but I never went for another nighttime walk. Not once. I'd take cabs for even short distances after dark, spend money I didn't have rather than risk the streets at night. When friends asked why I'd abandoned my nightly ritual, I made excuses about being too busy or trying to fix my sleep schedule. I never told anyone about the smiling man. What haunts me most isn't the impossibility of his movements or the way he seemed to appear and disappear. It's his expression. There was something in that smile, in those skyward-facing eyes, that wasn't just threatening or predatory. It was wrong, fundamentally wrong, like looking at something that wears humanity as an ill-fitting costume. I've seen people who were drunk, high, psychotic, or violent. This was different. This was something that existed outside the spectrum of normal human behavior, even abnormal human behavior. Sometimes I wake in the night and feel compelled to look out my window, afraid I'll see him on the street below, face tilted up, smiling directly at me. Those nights, I keep the curtains firmly closed and wait for dawn, for the safety of daylight and crowds. But even in broad daylight, in a new city thousands of miles away, I sometimes glimpse tall, thin figures at the edges of crowds and feel my heart skip. I find myself studying the way people walk, listening for footsteps that make no sound, scanning faces for smiles that stretch too wide. And on rare occasions, when I glance upward at the night sky, I can't help but wonder, what was he looking at? What did he see up there that kept his gaze so fixed, his smile so permanent? Whatever it was, I hope I never see it. I hope it never sees me. Story 3: The Stranger Under My Bed. Independence felt like a victory at 22. After years of dreaming about my own space, I'd finally signed the lease on my first apartment, a modest one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone. Nothing fancy, just mine. The rooms were small but flooded with natural light. The kitchen appliances were outdated but functional. The neighborhood was safe enough that my parents' concerns gradually eased after their 3rd visit. I spent weeks arranging furniture, hanging pictures, and transforming the space into something that felt like home. It was a Friday afternoon when I finally hung the last framed photo, a snapshot of my college friends and me at graduation. I stepped back to admire my work, satisfied that everything was finally in its place. My phone buzzed on the bed behind me. My friend Tara wanted to know if I'd be joining the group for dinner later. I picked up the phone to respond, but my fingers slipped and the device tumbled from my grasp, bouncing once on the comforter before disappearing beneath the bed. "Damn it," I muttered, dropping to my knees. The space under my bed was tight, just high enough to accommodate storage boxes, which I hadn't yet filled. I pressed my cheek against the hardwood floor, stretching my arm into the darkness, fingers searching blindly for the phone. The screen lit up with another incoming message, illuminating the space in a pale blue glow. That's when I saw him. My body froze, my arm still extended under the bed. My mind struggled to process what my eyes were seeing. A person, a man, was lying motionless beneath my bed, his back toward me. He was thin, dressed in stained clothes, his body curled inward like a child sleeping. His head was tucked to his chest so I couldn't see his face. A stranger was under my bed. The realization hit me with physical force, stealing the breath from my lungs. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was certain he could hear it. Yet he remained perfectly still, seemingly unaware that he'd been discovered. My instinct was to scream, to run, to call for help, but terror paralyzed me. How long had he been there? Had he been watching me as I moved about the apartment, hanging pictures, making coffee, changing clothes? Had he been there last night while I slept just inches above him? Survival instinct finally overwhelmed shock. With deliberate slowness, I withdrew my arm, careful not to make any sudden movements that might alert him to my discovery. My phone remained under the bed, still occasionally illuminating his huddled form with incoming message notifications. I rose to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me. I needed to get out, to call the police, but my apartment door was on the other side of the room. I would have to walk past the bed to reach it. My eyes remained fixed on the dark space beneath the mattress, half expecting a hand to shoot out and grab my ankle. My mind raced through options. The window? Too high up, no fire escape. Scream for neighbors? The building's thick walls had been a selling point for privacy, but now they felt like a prison. The bathroom had a locking door, but no window, no escape route. I'd be trapped if he came after me. Then I remembered Tara's messages. She was expecting a response. If I disappeared without explanation, how long before someone came looking for me? Hours, days. An idea formed, a desperate, risky plan, but the only one I could think of. With forced steadiness, I picked up my phone charger from the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, directly above where he lay hidden. I cleared my throat. "Sorry I dropped my phone," I said aloud, as if continuing a conversation. "I'm just going to take a shower and call you back." My voice sounded foreign to my ears, higher pitched than normal but surprisingly calm. I stood up slowly, the mattress springs creaking above him. With measured steps, I walked to the bathroom, each footfall deliberate, fighting the urge to run. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door with shaking hands, turned on the shower, and then stood frozen, listening for any sound of movement from the bedroom. The rushing water would cover any noise I made, but it would also mask any sound of him emerging from his hiding place. My gaze fell on the small window above the toilet, barely 18 inches square, but large enough for me to squeeze through if I removed the screen. It opened to a narrow ledge with a 10-foot drop to the alleyway below. A dangerous escape route, but my only option if he was waiting outside the bathroom door. I climbed onto the toilet tank, working quickly to loosen the window screen. Once it was free, I set it quietly in the bathtub. The window creaked slightly as I pushed it open, the sound thankfully covered by the running shower. Cold air rushed in as I poked my head outside, surveying the drop. There was a dumpster below that might break my fall, but it was offset from the window. I'd have to push off with enough force to reach it. Otherwise, I'd hit concrete. A sound from the bedroom made my blood run cold, the unmistakable creak of weight shifting on floorboards. He was moving. Without hesitation, I pulled myself through the window, scraping my shoulders against the frame, my legs dangling inside the bathroom as I struggled to maneuver my body through the tight opening. I heard the bathroom doorknob rattle just as I pulled my feet through, launching myself toward the dumpster below. I missed. My ankle twisted painfully as I hit the ground, falling forward onto my hands and knees on the rough pavement. Pain shot up my leg, but adrenaline dulled it to a distant throb as I scrambled to my feet. I limped as quickly as I could toward the street, pulling my phone from my pocket. My phone. It was still under the bed. I looked back at the building, at my bathroom window still open on the 3rd floor. No sign of pursuit, but I knew I couldn't risk returning. I spotted a convenience store at the end of the block, its fluorescent lights a beacon of safety. With each agonizing step, I prayed the clerk would have a phone I could use to call 911. The convenience store's automatic door slid open, releasing a blast of artificially cooled air that raised goosebumps on my sweat-dampened skin. A bored-looking clerk glanced up from his phone, his expression shifting to concern as he took in my disheveled appearance. "You okay, miss?" he asked, already reaching for the phone behind the counter. "No," I managed, my voice cracking. "There's someone in my apartment. I need to call the police." He handed me the phone without hesitation, and I punched in 911 with trembling fingers. The dispatcher's calm voice was a lifeline as I explained my situation between shallow breaths. Yes, I was safe. No, I hadn't seen his face. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. Yes, I would wait for officers to arrive. The clerk, whose name tag read Miguel, offered me a bottle of water and a plastic chair from the back room. I sank into it gratefully, my twisted ankle throbbing in time with my racing heart. Through the store windows, I watched the street with hyper-vigilant eyes, half expecting to see the man emerge from the alleyway, searching for me. "You live in the brownstone down the block?" Miguel asked, keeping a respectful distance. I nodded, taking a shaky sip of water. "My cousin lives there too, 2nd floor." He shook his head. "Never heard of break-ins there before." "The door locks automatically," I said, suddenly realizing the implication. "When it closes, it locks. I was getting mail earlier. He must have slipped in while the door was open." The thought made me nauseous. How long had he been following me? watching me, waiting for that moment of vulnerability. Flashing lights appeared outside as a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. 2 officers entered, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a younger woman whose alert eyes scanned the store as she approached. "Miss Chen?" the female officer asked, reading from her notepad. "I'm Officer Rivera. This is Officer Dawson. Can you tell us exactly what happened?" I recounted the story again, more coherently this time. As I spoke, a second police car arrived, followed by my friend Tara's familiar Subaru. She must have gotten worried when I didn't respond and tracked my location. The sight of her rushing into the store, concern etched across her features, finally broke the dam I'd been holding back. Tears streamed down my face as she wrapped her arms around me. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now." While Tara stayed with me, 4 officers approached my building, disappearing inside. Time stretched endlessly as we waited, my imagination conjuring terrifying scenarios. Had he escaped? Was he still there, hiding? Would they believe me if they found nothing? 20 minutes later, Officer Rivera returned. "We found him," she said, her expression grim. "He was still in your apartment, trying to leave through the same bathroom window you escaped from." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by a wave of revulsion. It wasn't my imagination. He had been real. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "His name is Daniel Keene. He's homeless, has a history of mental health issues. He's been taken into custody." She hesitated before continuing. "Ms. Chen, there's something else you should know. Officer Dawson found a knife from your kitchen in his possession. It was by the bathroom door." The implication hit me like a physical blow. If I hadn't escaped when I did, if I'd actually taken that shower. "We believe he entered your building this morning and has been hiding in your apartment all day," Officer Rivera continued. "Based on what we found, he appears to have been living in various empty apartments in the building over the past month, moving whenever new tenants arrived. Your unit was the only occupied one he entered." "Did he say why?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. She shook her head. "He's not communicative right now. He's being taken for psychiatric evaluation." The officers took my formal statement at the police station, where I learned more details that only intensified my horror. Daniel Keene had been found with a small notebook containing observations about my daily routine, when I left for work, when I returned, which lights I turned on in which order. He'd been watching me for weeks, long before I discovered him under my bed. They also found a collection of small items from my apartment: a hairbrush with strands of my hair, a used coffee mug I thought I'd misplaced, a sock from my laundry basket. Small things I wouldn't immediately notice were missing. Trophies. By the time the police finished questioning me, it was well past midnight. The thought of returning to my apartment was unbearable. Tara insisted I stay with her, and I gratefully accepted. As we drove to her place, I stared out the window at the darkened buildings we passed, wondering how many other predators lurked unseen, watching and waiting. "You can stay as long as you need," Tara said, squeezing my hand. "My couch is yours." I nodded, unable to form words through the exhaustion that had settled over me like a heavy blanket. That night, despite my fatigue, sleep remained elusive. Every creak in Tara's apartment jerked me awake. Every shadow seemed to shift and move when I wasn't looking directly at it. I kept the light on, my borrowed phone clutched in my hand, 911 pre-dialed and ready. In the days that followed, I learned more about Daniel Keene. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia years earlier, but had stopped taking his medication. He had no violent criminal history before this incident, a fact that provided little comfort. The police believed I was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a convenient target when he needed a new hiding place. I never returned to live in that apartment. Tara and her boyfriend helped me move my belongings out the following weekend while I waited in the car, unable to step foot inside the space that no longer felt like mine. The property manager, horrified by what had happened, returned my security deposit and released me from the lease. Daniel Keene was committed to a psychiatric facility. I was told he would remain there for the foreseeable future, but the knowledge brought little peace. My sense of safety had been fundamentally shattered. It took 3 months before I could sleep through the night without waking in panic, certain someone was watching me from a dark corner. 6 months before I stopped checking under the bed every night, and then checking again just to be sure. A year before, I felt comfortable living alone again, in a high-rise building with 24-hour security and no spaces big enough for someone to hide. The physical evidence of that day has long since faded. My twisted ankle healed within weeks. The scratches from the window frame disappeared in days, but some wounds leave no visible scars. Even now, when I drop something that rolls under furniture, my heart rate spikes. I use a selfie stick to retrieve it rather than putting my face near that dark space. When entering my apartment, I check every closet, behind every shower curtain, under every bed. A ritual that brings only partial relief from the gnawing anxiety that someone might be waiting, watching. Because I learned something that day that most people have the luxury of never discovering. The monsters that hunt us don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they're just desperate, broken people lying in wait, inches away while we go about our lives, oblivious to the danger until it's almost too late. Story 4. Ayano's Obsession. This story isn't mine. It belongs to my friend from Japan. I'll call him Rita. Even now, years later, his voice still trembles when he speaks of it. Some memories never lose their sharp edges, no matter how much time passes. When Rita was 11, he was a bright-eyed boy with an easy smile, the kind of child that adults instinctively warmed to and peers gravitated toward. With his fluffy black hair and wide, expressive eyes, he had an unintentional charm that drew attention. Most of this attention was harmless, the natural response to a charismatic child, but not all of it. Rita lived with his mother and younger sister in a modest home in a residential neighborhood outside Tokyo. His father worked overseas and sent money home, but was rarely present. Rita's mother worked long hours at a local office, leaving him often in the care of various babysitters or home alone with his sister once he was deemed old enough for the responsibility. Their neighborhood was considered safe, the kind where doors remained unlocked during daylight hours and children played freely in the streets until dinner time. It was the sort of community where everyone knew everyone, or at least recognized their faces. This included Ayano Matsuki. Ayano lived 3 houses down from Rita's family. At 17, she was 6 years his senior, awkwardly straddling the line between adolescence and adulthood. She was quiet, academically successful, and largely unremarkable. Just another neighborhood teenager who occasionally nodded politely when passing Rita on the street. Or at least, that's how it began. Rita first noticed something unusual about Ayano's behavior toward him during a summer festival. While other teenagers clustered together, laughing and flirting in their colorful yukabuas, Ayano stood apart, her gaze following Rita as he played with friends his own age. When their eyes met, she didn't look away with the embarrassment of someone caught staring. Instead, she smiled, a strange, tight-lipped smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and continued watching. I thought maybe she was friends with one of the babysitters, Rita told me years later, or that my mother had asked her to keep an eye on me. I tried to rationalize it. Days after the festival, Rita began noticing Ayano more frequently in his daily routine. She would be reading on a bench near his school at dismissal time. She would appear at the convenience store where he bought snacks after soccer practice. She would take the same train car when he visited friends across town, always maintaining a careful distance, always watching. The shift from coincidence to pattern happened so gradually that Rita struggled to pinpoint when exactly he became certain she was following him. By then, it had already escalated beyond mere observation. The first messages arrived in early autumn, simple texts to Rita's phone, innocuous questions and comments that seemed friendly on the surface. "Did you finish your math homework? That blue shirt looks nice on you. Be careful crossing at the intersection near the bakery. The cars come too fast." Rita didn't question how she had obtained his number. Many of the neighborhood families exchanged contact information for emergencies. The messages were odd but didn't seem threatening, so he responded politely but briefly, hoping his minimal engagement would discourage further communication. It didn't. The messages increased in frequency and detail. 20, 30 messages a day. Morning check-ins, lunchtime observations, evening goodnights. Questions about his activities that he hadn't shared with anyone. Comments about what he was wearing or eating that she couldn't possibly know unless she had been watching him. "You should eat your lunch today. You barely touched it. I think your sister is hungry. She's been crying for 10 minutes. The light in your bedroom was on until 11:43 p.m. You need more sleep." Rita showed the messages to his mother, who dismissed them as a harmless crush from a socially awkward teenager. "She'll grow out of it," she assured him. "Just be kind, but keep your distance." But distance became increasingly difficult to maintain. Ayano inserted herself into Rita's life with a determined precision that belied her age. She volunteered at his school's library. She befriended his neighbors. She became a familiar presence to his mother through community events, always helpful, always pleasant. By winter, Rita had stopped using his phone entirely. He deleted his social media accounts. He varied his routes to school and activities. He asked friends to walk with him whenever possible. But Ayano's presence remained constant, adapting to each evasive maneuver with unsettling patience. The situation reached a critical point when Rita's regular babysitter quit unexpectedly. His mother, overwhelmed with work and lacking immediate alternatives, accepted Ayano's timely offer to fill in. "I came home from school to find her in our kitchen," Rita recalled, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She was wearing my mother's apron and cooking dinner like she belonged there. My sister was already seated at the table, eating cookies Ayano had baked. They had little hearts piped onto them." That afternoon passed without incident. Ayano helped with homework, prepared a decent meal, and left when Rita's mother returned. She was so competent, so seemingly normal in her interactions, that Rita's mild protests about feeling uncomfortable around her were again attributed to preteen embarrassment over a crush. Ayano became a semi-regular fixture in their home after that, filling in whenever the new babysitter was unavailable. Each visit further cemented her relationship with Rita's mother, who increasingly relied on the responsible teenager's help. "She was playing the long game," Rita explained, "building trust with my mother while knowing exactly how to behave when adults were watching. It was different when we were alone. Nothing I could point to as obviously wrong, just the way she looked at me when no one else was there, like I was something that belonged to her." Spring arrived, bringing longer days and the promise of a new school year. Rita's mother received an unexpected opportunity, a 3-day business trip that would mean a significant promotion if successful. The timing was terrible. The regular babysitter was visiting family out of town. "My mother was torn about leaving us," Rita said. Then Ayano suggested that I could stay at her house. Her parents would be home, she said. It would be like a fun sleepover. What Rita didn't know then was that Ayano's parents worked night shifts. What he didn't know was that Ayano had told his mother that she had already discussed this arrangement with him and that he was excited about it. What he didn't know, as his mother kissed him goodbye and reminded him to be on his best behavior at Ayano's house, was that he wouldn't be returning home for 5 days, and that those days would change him forever. Rita watched from the passenger seat as his neighborhood receded behind them. Ayano hummed softly as she drove, occasionally glancing at him with that same tight-lipped smile. Her car, an older model handed down from her parents, smelled of artificial strawberry air freshener and something else, something chemical that made the air feel thick. "My mother thinks you're staying for 3 days," Ayano said casually, her eyes returning to the road. "But we have so much planned, I've arranged for you to stay longer. Isn't that nice?" Rita's stomach clenched. "What do you mean? She's only gone for 3 days. I called your mother this morning. I used my mother's voice." Ayano's tone remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. "I told her that my family is going to visit relatives in Kyoto and asked if you could join us. She agreed it would be a wonderful experience for you." The realization that he was now effectively missing, that his own mother believed he was somewhere he wasn't, sent a wave of cold panic through Rita's body. He gripped the door handle, considering his options. They were stopped at a red light. Could he run? Where would he go? Would anyone believe him over Ayano? As if reading his thoughts, Ayano reached across and engaged the child's safety lock. "For your protection," she said, her smile never faltering. Ayano's house was modest but meticulously kept, a 2-story home with traditional elements in a quieter part of town. She led Rita inside, carrying his hastily packed overnight bag. The entryway was lined with family photos. Ayano as a child, Ayano in school uniforms through the years, her parents in formal poses. Completely normal. "My parents are at work," she explained, arranging his shoes neatly in the entryway. "They work night shifts at the hospital. They won't be back until morning, and then they'll sleep most of the day. We'll have plenty of time together." That first night established the pattern for Rita's captivity. Ayano prepared an elaborate dinner, watching intently as he ate, commenting on his table manners, his posture, how he held his chopsticks. After dinner came what she called family time. Board games played under strict rules of her creation, followed by television programs she had pre-selected. "She made me sit next to her on the couch," Rita recalled. "Not touching, but close enough that she could reach out and fix my hair or straighten my collar whenever she wanted. She kept calling me her good boy and talking about how perfect we were together." When bedtime came, Ayano showed Rita to a small guest room that had been meticulously prepared for his arrival. The bedding was new, still with store creases. The shelves held books for boys his age. A selection of clothes, all in his size but not his, filled the closet. Had she been planning this for months? Years? Rita wondered aloud as he told me the story. The room was like something from a catalog, a perfect boy's room with no personality, no history. It wasn't meant for a guest. It was meant for me. Ayano stood in the doorway, watching as he explored the room. "Do you like it? I've been getting it ready for so long." She left him alone that night, locking the door from the outside. Rita tried the window but found it secured with child safety locks that required a key. He was trapped but relatively safe for the moment. The second day brought the beginning of what Ayano called their games. First was House, with Rita assigned the role of husband and Ayano as wife. She had created elaborate scenarios requiring him to act out domestic routines, coming home from work, complimenting her cooking, discussing imaginary bills and neighbors. When he resisted or broke character, her demeanor would shift instantly from warm to cold, her eyes hardening to obsidian. "That's not how a husband acts," she would say, tone flat. "Let's try again. You need to learn." Then came school, with Ayano as teacher and Rita as student, forced to complete actual worksheets and receive grades based on arbitrary criteria she invented. Every activity had rules, complex, shifting rules that seemed designed to make him fail so she could correct him. The worst was a game she called Hide Your Fear, Rita said, his voice barely audible. She would blindfold me and leave me somewhere in the house, sometimes a closet, sometimes the bathroom with cold water running, once the trunk of her car in the garage. I had to remain perfectly silent no matter how afraid I was. If I made a sound, she added time. By the third day, Rita's absence from his actual life had surely been noticed. He hadn't appeared at school. Friends would have called, but Ayano showed no concern, suggesting his mother had handled all necessary communications. "She's told everyone you're with us in Kyoto," Ayano explained during breakfast. "She's so happy you're having this cultural experience. She sent me photos to show you." Ayano displayed her phone with images of Kyoto temples and gardens. Stock photos, Rita realized, not actual vacation pictures. That afternoon, Ayano left Rita blindfolded in her parents' bedroom while she went to her part-time job. "My parents won't be home," she assured him. "They're working double shifts this week. Isn't that lucky for us? You need to stay absolutely quiet. This is our longest game of hide your fear yet." Hours passed in darkness. The blindfold was tied too tightly to remove without hands, which she had secured behind his back with what felt like a scarf. The house creaked and settled around him, each sound amplifying his terror. Was she really at work or watching him from somewhere? Were her parents truly absent, or might they return and find him? His salvation came in an unexpected form. The television in the living room, which Ayano had left on to mask any neighborhood sounds that might help Rita orient himself, switched to a news broadcast. Through the bedroom door, he could hear his own name. "Local authorities are searching for 11-year-old Rita Tanaka, last seen 5 days ago." The boy's mother returned from a business trip to find no evidence of her son's whereabouts. A neighbor reports seeing him leave with 17-year-old Ayano Matsuki, who claimed to be babysitting. Hope surged through Rita like an electric current. People were looking for him. His disappearance had been discovered. Before he could process this development, he heard the front door open and close. Rapid footsteps approached the bedroom, the television abruptly silenced. "You've been very bad," Ayano's voice came from the doorway, cold and controlled. "Very, very bad." The blindfold was yanked from his eyes. Ayano stood before him, her face twisted with an emotion Rita couldn't name, beyond anger, beyond obsession. In her hand was the television remote. "No one understands," she whispered. "They're trying to separate us." For the first time, Rita saw the situation with perfect clarity. Ayano wasn't merely strange or obsessive, she was dangerous. The realization brought a strange calm. When she turned to retrieve something from her dresser, he acted on instinct. Using the momentum of his body weight, Rita slammed into her, knocking them both toward the bedroom window. The impact sent them sprawling. He rolled away, scrambling to his feet despite his bound hands. Ayano recovered quickly, lunging toward him, but Rita was faster, fueled by survival instinct. He made it to the next room, her bedroom, and kicked over a lamp, sending it crashing through the window. The glass shattered outward. "Help!" he screamed with every ounce of strength in his lungs. "Help me! I'm Rita Tanaka." Whether by miracle or providence, a couple was walking past Ayano's house at that exact moment. They heard his cries, saw the broken window, and called the police immediately. When Ayano tried to drag him away from the window, the couple shouted that they could see her, that help was coming. The next hours passed in a blur of police sirens, paramedics, and his mother's tearful embrace. Rita was found with his hands bound, minor bruising, and signs of dehydration, but physically intact. The psychological damage, however, ran deeper. When police searched Ayano's room, they discovered a shrine-like collection of items. Photographs of Rita taken without his knowledge, pages from his school notebooks, a calendar marking his activities, even clippings of his hair. More disturbing were the journals detailing her plans for their future together once he was properly trained. "I only remember fragments of what happened after the police arrived," Rita told me, running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd developed since the incident. "My mother holding me so tightly it hurt." Ayano being led to a police car, still calling my name like we had some special connection. The detective's face when he looked through her journals. Rita and his family moved to Australia less than a month later. The Japanese legal system dealt with Ayano, though as a minor with mental health issues, her case was handled with more focus on treatment than punishment. Rita never learned exactly what happened to her, a deliberate choice on his part. "I don't want to know where she is now," he said firmly. "I don't want to know if she's been released or if she's still in treatment. Some doors are better left closed." Years of therapy have helped Rita process the trauma, but certain wounds never fully heal. He still flinches at the scent of strawberry. He cannot tolerate blindfolds or small, dark spaces. The sound of a door locking behind him can trigger panic attacks. And, though he rationally understands that Ayano is far away, possibly still institutionalized, and has no way of finding him, there remains an irrational fear that someday he'll look up and see that tight-lipped smile watching him from across a crowded room, patient and possessive as ever.